where it got brought up, one of my favorite analogies to use when it comes to martial arts, and that is the parable of the blind men and the elephant. So I'm going to get to that. Um, First, just a couple of short channel announcements. Um, One thing is in regards to formatting. I'm starting to get into books that are not instructional books. And whereas my normal format includes pros and cons, I don't know if I can really do that when I get into books that are, like on philosophy or are autobiographical. So, with that in mind, just as a minor heads up, when I get to those videos, I'm probably going to do like highlights or points that stand out or something like that. The other minor announcement is that this is the last live video that I'm almost certainly going to be doing from this room. Um, I'm going to be moving, probably. And what this means for you guys is that this background is going to change. I tend to record videos in clumps. So I've actually got weeks of pre-recorded long form videos, and I will probably record some more before I make the move. So it won't be a quick transition. I don't know how to not make it jarring. I hope that it won't be. But yeah, you're going to start seeing a different background in about a month's time. Um, Also, because there is some uncertainty with that, I should be able to keep most of the regular videos going uninterrupted. I don't know if I'm going to have a spot to do a live Tangent Tuesday next month. Anyway, on to tonight's topic. So, the story of the blind men and the elephant. To the best of my understanding, it originates in the Indian subcontinent, and it goes something like this. There's this group of blind men, and word comes to them that there's an elephant being kept nearby, and none of them have ever experienced an elephant before. So they decide that they're going to go and check out this elephant. And being blind, they cannot rely on their sense of sight. So they get to the elephant and they start to touch it. And as it happens, they're all touching different parts of it. So, one is touching the elephant's side. It's like, oh, an elephant is like a wall. And one is touching the elephant's leg. No, an elephant is like a tree trunk. One's touching its tail. It's, no, an elephant is like a rope. And of course, the moral of the story is that we see things from our own perspective. Maybe seeing isn't the right word to use here. We perceive things from our own perspective, but oftentimes do not get a complete picture. So, how does this relate to martial arts? Well, it's one of the reasons that I am a big fan of cross training. Because, and I'm probably going to repeat myself throughout this video by saying this, you don't know what you don't know. In other words, one of my cats is playing over here. In other words, you may not have a complete understanding of what your system teaches or what it does not teach, or on a smaller scale, what your teacher or school teaches and does not teach, or what they understand or do not understand. From my own experience, my first martial art was karate, and I had books on boxing and books on Jeet Kune Do, which a lot of its hand techniques come from boxing. And yeah, I was like, oh, I understand boxing. And then I started boxing, and I did not understand boxing because, having an academic understanding of, okay, this is what a jab is, this is what a hook is not the same as experiencing it. My experience up to that point was limited to reading books and watching a few things on TV. Um, and at that time, it seemed sort of unremarkable to me. Like, I come from karate. I know how to throw a punch, and we also have other techniques like back fists and ridge hands. It's a different world, you know. Since then, boxing has become one of my favorite things to train because despite its rather limited scope, there is a depth to it. And of course, if I hadn't had that experience, if I hadn't, gotten my feet wet, if I hadn't started to train boxing, like really look into it beyond, oh, this is what a jab is, then I would have no idea what I was missing out on. Similarly, my take on wrestling initially, like, okay, it's got no strikes, it's got no submissions. Speaking of American amateur wrestling, why would I want to look into this at all except for, okay, you grab a guy's leg and you push him over. Again, that is like barely a surface understanding of what that art is. And of course, once I started training in wrestling, my understanding of it improved, which is one of the reasons, again, why I would really emphasize, like I will jump at the opportunity to learn anything. Like I've, you know, gone to like capoeira classes and dropped into, Aikido classes and stuff like that. Just I got the experience that I could afford to have at the time because I'm not made of money. And I have a limited amount of time. And also, yeah, that's Harper's tale. Hello, Harper. Irrelevant to this discussion, Harper recently had a vet appointment and got a clean bill of health. We had a bit of a health scare late last year, but she's good to go, and I'm happy about that. But she does like hanging out on the desk and walking over the keyboard. Anyway, um, so yeah, when a lot of times online, I find myself sort of defending things like Brazilian Jiu Jitsu and grappling as a whole and mixed martial arts. Not because I'm really an apologist for those things. I sometimes am concerned that I'm coming across that way, but simply because most of I've repeatedly seen statements where people don't actually, it's clear that they don't actually understand the things that they're talking about when it comes to those particular topics. So to that end, because I have experience in training in those things, I feel the need to sort of like, hi, if you train in MMA, you don't have to go to the ground. There are entire fighters who've made their career over not going to the ground. So if your perspective is I don't want to train this because I don't want to take the fight to the ground, that might be the opposite of the reason to train it. So again, people only know what they have from their own experience. Similarly, I had a rather recent interaction with a guy who was surprised that people thought that his style didn't spar because his school sparred. And then I presented, web pages from other schools around the globe in his style where they say we don't spar. They were eschewing competition and actually sort of looked down on it, like, no, we have a fighting to the death style. We don't do that sport stuff. He's like, huh, that's weird because in my school they'll allow us to go into any competition we want to. So even that was news to him because from his perspective, this is what his style did because his school, and I would infer perhaps some of the surrounding or associated schools, that was his experience. So even within our own styles, another example, I know in particular in the United Kingdom, there are karate schools that, you know, are very modernized and or focused on self-defense. So they may come across as from the outside as maybe more of an MMA school because they're doing like clinch flow drills, or they're wearing like full on headgear with plastic masks and fingerless gloves, and they're not using e-tops, and they're doing simulations of various attacks, and that's more like reality-based self-defense stuff. It's very different from the more common format, which is basics, forms, and usually light contact sparring. So if your experience with karate is one of those more modernized schools, you might be very surprised if you go to another school that has that more common format. Um, so again, even within our own styles, it's worth looking into how other schools do things. Now, beyond that level, I think it's also important to look at this parable when we look at the systems themselves, and in particular, the founders of those systems. Because I do have admiration and respect for the likes of Jigoro Kano and Bruce Lee and the Gracie family for developing their own stuff. General Choi, all those guys. If you systemize a fighting system, you clearly put some work in. But every martial art out there was created by an individual or a small group of individuals. And they were all drawing on their knowledge, their experience, their biases. Some martial arts were created to fill a particular need, and that martial art might be very good at that thing. But the scope of hand-to-hand combat is more than what one martial art can cover. And I strongly suspect that some people will, my style covers everything. It might cover a lot. I have yet to come across a school that can teach the entire breadth of hand-to-hand combat to the same depth as training in a number of specialized systems. In other words, those that focus on, for instance, clinch fighting or fighting at a range, or working with weapons or what have you. We have to admit that the founders of the various martial arts styles, they were human, they lived in a specific time, in a specific place. They had what resources were available to them. Nobody 100 years ago had the amount of violent encounters on film that we have. Nobody from back then had the same access to the breadth of martial arts that we have today. I live in a major metropolitan area, and you can't throw a rock without hitting like a jiu-jitsu school or a capoeira school or a taekwondo school, because places are all over the place. That is not something that people will have had as much access to back in the day. So we live in very fortunate times, and while we can admire the founders of the various martial arts for their accomplishments, for putting forth, these codified ideas of, maximum result, minimum effort, and stuff like that, it really is up to us to recognize that at the end of the day, they had limitations. And as much as we like them and admire them, and as much as we like the different styles that we're training in, if our goal is to be good at practical combat, we need to recognize that there is not one system out there that will have all the answers for every situation, or even perhaps the answers that we in particular need. I had a lot of really good answers in some systems, but training in other things, or even just researching or cross training with somebody, oh, you do taekwondo, I do karate. Let's mess around and see what comes out of our sparring, or show me what your favorite technique is, or whatever. There's so much to be gained from looking outside of the little bubble. And can you imagine what the founders of all those martial arts styles would have developed today with the access to information that we have now, with the training equipment that we have now, with the decades of competition on film. If you're looking into something that draws from a competitive background, we have so much. And I know some people think this way, but I don't think exploring beyond the scope of one single martial art is in any way disrespecting that martial art. People, individuals, are more important than a martial art. So it's up to us to really get out there and explore what's out there. And it's always valuable to learn something and to see things from a different perspective. And I think it really should be on us as martial artists to, if we consider ourselves true martial artists, and I really hate that term because it's so loaded and thrown around by so many guys that basically gatekeep. I hate that. But if your goal is to be the best martial artist you can be, you owe it to yourself to look outside of whatever your home system is, so that you don't miss all that heavenly glory, as Bruce Lee said in Enter the Dragon. There's a lot of martial arts out there. A lot of it crosses over, but you can also explore and experience so many things that you wouldn't if you just stayed stuck in this one system. So I'm starting to repeat myself now. That's a bad sign. But yeah, that's all I got for tonight. And, please feel free to give me feedback on what your experience with cross training has been, why or why not you would recommend it. And thank you for indulging me. And I'll see you guys later.